She thought she'd struck gold. She didn't know she'd just triggered the vault alarm I designed. My name is Lucas Greer. I'm 47 years old, a financial systems engineer for Horizon Trust, based out of Columbus, Ohio. Most days I design fraud detection infrastructure for corporate clients who move seven-figure sums without blinking. My work isn't flashy, but it's precise. On a crisp Wednesday morning while I was fine-tuning a multi-layered monitoring loop for a Fortune 500 firm, my phone buzzed. It was my wife, Elena. I expected a quick check-in, maybe something about the dry cleaning or dinner. Instead, it was a digital bullet to the chest. I'm done. I found someone better. I've already moved the funds, the house is yours. No hello, no warning. Just a declaration of finality, as if our 21-year marriage had been a contract she could exit with a few clicks and a confident swipe. I didn't curse, I didn't shout, I didn't even stand up. I simply set my coffee down, unlocked my phone, and opened the financial system I had quietly built over the years, not for her but for me. A private suite of integrated dashboards, asset protection triggers, multi-path routing logs, and what I called the panic room. It wasn't paranoia, it was habit. The same instinct that leads a pilot to run pre-flight checks even on a sunny day. You don't build a system like mine unless you've seen what unmonitored money can do to people. The moment Elena executed her transfers, my dashboard lit up like Times Square on New Year's Eve. Red flags, yellow warnings, layered alerts cascading across joint retirement accounts, IRAs, and high-yield investment portfolios. She didn't know that the moment she moved more than $10,000, 0 cents from our Roth account without my biometric confirmation, the system froze the transaction and launched a secondary validation protocol with our bank's fraud division. That's not flair. That's federal compliance. I had wired the system so tightly that even I had to jump through hoops to move major funds. She wasn't just careless. She was outmatched. She pulled the trigger not knowing I'd built the bulletproof glass. Most people imagine betrayal with screaming matches, broken plates, doors slammed so hard they echo. Mine arrived with perfect grammar and clean punctuation. Elena was supposed to be in Chicago for a branding summit. 3 days. She'd kissed me goodbye 2 mornings ago like it was any other week. And yet here we were, trying to vanish with a fortune, thinking I'd never see it coming. She didn't know that her attempt was being time-stamped, archived, and parsed in real time by the very network I'd spent a decade perfecting. Every IP address, every login location, every transaction route. I didn't text her back. Not yet. What could I say that would matter now? That I'd spent years protecting our future while she rehearsed her exit strategy, that I'd trusted her with everything except the one thing I never leave to chance. She tried to disappear with the treasure, but she never noticed the pressure plates built into the floor, and Elena didn't know every step she took lit up my dashboard like a Christmas tree. They say love begins with chemistry, but ours started more like an algorithm. 2 opposing functions that somehow ran in perfect sync. I met Elena when we were both 21, in a senior seminar at the University of Missouri. She was electric. While she could persuade a professor to extend a deadline with just a smile, I was submitting assignments a week early and flagging grammar mistakes in textbooks. She was the spark, I was the code. Somehow it worked. We married 2 years after graduation, built our first home on the outskirts of Columbus, and made a life that looked simple from the outside. She brought the color. I laid the framework. I managed the finances, painstakingly, methodically, the way someone raised by a single mother with a filing cabinet of overdue bills does. Meanwhile, Elena rocketed through the marketing world. By the time she turned 30, she was a senior brand strategist at Atlas Merge, a digital giant that treated attention like currency. She could pitch to a boardroom of millionaires without breaking a sweat. And I preferred server rooms over spotlights. I was the firewall. She was the interface everyone admired. The shift didn't come all at once. Like system degradation, it began subtly, abolished a lesson as you knew where to look. She stopped asking questions about our retirement projections. At first I chalked it up to confidence. Then came the new credit card, no big deal, until the bills started arriving addressed only to her. I flagged the account, ran a light Tracy out of habit, not suspicious, but the data patterns didn't match her old spending habits. Spa weekends, designer luggage, a boutique consulting firm in Tampa I'd never heard of. I didn't say anything. Not yet. But the query was already running in my mind. Then there were the trips, more frequent, more vague, Corporate offsite, she'd say, breezing out the door with a suitcase that looked more luxury vacation than business retreat. When she returned, her stories were shorter, her eyes distracted. She'd wave away my questions, talk about stress, competition, how branding was becoming more cutthroat. I told myself I was imagining it, that we were just in a midlife lull, that people evolve, and maybe I was too rigid, too dependent on rules and audits. But the truth was simpler. I had built a system for external threats. I never thought to protect it from the person I loved most. And still, I said nothing. Not when she began locking her phone, not when her laptop had a new password, not even when she snapped at me for reviewing our tax software without asking. "I'm not one of your spreadsheets, Lucas," she said once, slamming the door as she walked out. She was right. She wasn't a spreadsheet, but she had become an anomaly in my data set. Love isn't lost in one moment. It's deprecated gradually, quietly, like old code that no longer runs but stays buried in the program. I thought if I just updated myself enough, was more attentive, more flexible, I could sync us back up. But she wasn't debugging. She was deleting and replacing. She thought she was clearing her browser history. It started with a question that seemed harmless, almost sweet. We were eating dinner on the patio, a rare quiet Thursday. The cicadas buzzed like static in the humid Columbus air, and Elena casually stirred her wine. "Hey," she said almost offhand, "how much do we have in retirement now? Ballpark?" I paused, fork halfway to my mouth. She looked relaxed, unbothered, like she was asking about the weather. Around $920,000, 0 cents across both accounts, I replied, watching her reaction with the same quiet precision I used when running penetration tests on a client's server. She nodded, smiled, and changed the subject. But I knew that wasn't just curiosity. It was reconnaissance. The following week, she told me she had a marketing summit in San Diego, 3 days, standard stuff. I didn't question it. After all, travel was her second language. But something about the way she packed that night, too quick, too polished, felt more like an exit strategy than a work trip. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to, because while Elena moved like a thief at midnight, she forgot one thing. I was the night vision camera she didn't know was watching. You see, years ago, long before we ever needed it, I built a personal fraud detection system that rivaled the ones we deployed for clients at Horizon Trust, not out of paranoia, but out of principle. I believed that transparency was just another form of love. Every major account of ours was synced to my protocoled receipt. Every account of ours was triggered a verification process requiring dual approval, not from a bank, but from the private architecture I designed myself. Elena had no idea. At 2:13 a.m., while she was presumably sleeping in her hotel suite, or wherever she was, the system pinged me with a category red alert. She had attempted 3 wire transfers totaling $683,000, 0 cents from our joint retirement accounts to 2 newly registered LLCs based in Nevada. The company names were generic enough to pass a casual glance: Eclipse Strategies and Meridian Ridge, LLC. Shells, ghosts, cloaks for vanishing assets. What she didn't know was that every suspicious behavior, destination mismatch, account age, off-hour timing, fed into my system's predictive matrix. And this time, the matrix lit up like a fireworks display. Within seconds, the auto-response kicked in, transfers suspended, IP addresses flagged. The system sent notifications to both of our emails and locked access pending review. Elena wake up to a frozen empire and a very confused bank officer. I didn't panic. I didn't rage. I simply sipped my coffee and monitored the logs, watching the digital footprints she tried so hard to erase stack up on my dashboard like red flags in a windstorm. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a blueprint, and I could read every line. She thought she could outsmart me with charm and misdirection, like a magician with a flash of light. But she was performing for the wrong audience. The real trick wasn't in the escape, it was in the system built to see through illusion. She tried to vanish with the treasure. Instead, she triggered the trapdoor. The phone rang at 6:17 a.m., an unusual time for Elena, whose mornings usually began with yoga and carefully curated silence. I let it buzz twice before answering. "Lucas," she said, her voice thin, stretched taut like fraying cable. "My cards aren't working. I tried to book a return flight and got declined. I called the bank. Everything's frozen. What's happening?" I didn't flinch, didn't sigh, just spoke with the same tone I used in executive briefings. Calm, clinical, unshaken. There were multiple high-risk transactions flagged by my fraud system. It's integrated into federal reporting channels. Once that threshold is crossed, it initiates a multi-agency freeze. I didn't do this. The system. Silence crackled on the other end. Then, "Are you serious?" Her voice now sharper, like glass underfoot. "I needed that money. I have plans. Do something. Unlock it." Heaping graceful. I have no choice, but I just glowed with a cascade of red alerts. "It's out of my hands," I said flatly. "This is no longer just between us. The system's escalated it to federal oversight. It's protocol now." She went quiet. I imagined her pacing whatever hotel room or borrowed apartment she was hiding in, the walls closing in around her like shrinking permissions in a revoked admin account. "You're doing this to punish me?" she hissed. "You think freezing me out makes you the victim?" But even in her fury, she was too late. This wasn't vengeance. It was architecture. A response not of revenge, but design. What she didn't understand was that I hadn't set the trap for her. I had set it for anyone who tried to lie in numbers. The calls kept coming. Her tone shifted from rage to pleading, from accusatory to wounded. "Please, Lucas, I made a mistake. We can figure this out. I just panicked." But I had nothing left to offer. My silence wasn't cruel. It was final. She'd mistaken access for control, assumed the one who built the gate would always keep the keys. But the truth was simpler. Cold a system so I wouldn't have to make this decision. Our marriage had become a database, elegant on the surface but corrupted at its core. And like any corrupted system, the only solution was to isolate the threat before it infected everything else. I didn't gloat. I didn't scold. I let the process run, because that's what systems are for. To strip emotion from accountability. Elena had tried to ghost herself out of our life, slipping through financial back doors she thought I'd never lock. But in trying to rewrite our ending, she'd triggered a script I'd embedded long ago. A silent guardian that didn't care about excuses, just anomalies. Her plan had failed, but the real virus hadn't even shown up yet. I was sipping black coffee, eyes flicking through transaction flags on my dashboard, when the first real ghost of her deeper trail surfaced. A soft ping from the monitoring panel drew my attention. Elena had attempted to open 3 new lines of credit using our old address. Not our current home in Upper Arlington, but the condo we sold 5 years ago. The system flagged it instantly. Fraud attempt, high risk. I barely blinked. She wasn't just trying to vanish, she was trying to rebuild a financial identity on a skeleton of the past. That wasn't panic, that was calculation. By noon, the second shoe dropped. I got a call from an unknown number, internal extension from Atlas Merge. "This is Grant Dawson," the voice said, polite but tense. "I'm a senior compliance auditor here. I don't usually make these calls, but you're Lucas Greener, yes? Elena's husband?" "Was," I corrected. He cleared his throat. "Understood. Look, I'll get to the point. We've noticed irregular activity tied to her department. Travel expenses that don't align, vendor contracts redirected, budget lines that appear altered after approval. Initially, it looked like minor accounting mistakes, but the patterns are repeating. Then your name came up." I stiffened. "My name?" "Yes. One of the flagged expense reports listed a vendor address tied to a financial consultancy you dissolved years ago. Someone tried to bury a $32,000 0 cents transfer through that shell. Internal systems pulled up the old link to your EIN. My blood ran cold. Elena had used my defunct business as camouflage. My legacy as a front for her cover-up. It didn't stop there, Grant continued. "This isn't just one expense. We're talking about 12 months worth of suspicious movement, spaced out, staggered, but pointing to a larger operation. And here's the kicker. Your wife wasn't acting alone. There's evidence she and a division director." I let the numbers settle like ash. For a moment, everything inside me felt scorched. My trust, my memory, the story I thought I knew. Elena hadn't just broken our marriage. She'd weaponized her career, forged relationships into pipelines for theft. "Do you have proof?" I asked. "Enough to start formal proceedings," Grant replied. "But we need your cooperation, especially given your background. Your fraud detection system." He was right. She thought she was bypassing suspicion with spreadsheets and polished smiles. She wasn't just siphoning trust. She was laundering deception. Everything she'd done, every fake invoice, every forged signature, was run through the filter of charm she wore like a second skin, and the company bought it. Until the math stopped making sense. I forwarded everything, the alerts, the flagged transfers, the metadata. I even offered access to a sandbox version of my system so they could mirror the patterning engine I built. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because theft, dressed up in PowerPoint and lipstick, is still theft. And justice doesn't care how well you deliver a keynote speech. It cares what's under the audit trail. For years, I believed the worst she could take from me was love, but that was just the introduction. The real story, the crime, was only getting started. I thought the betrayal ended with love. Turns out, it was just phase 1. The call came on a Thursday morning direct from the Office of Financial Crime Enforcement. Agent Marissa Laird introduced herself with the kind of composure that meant business. "Mr. Greer," she said, "we've been reviewing internal audits from Atlas Merge. Your name and your fraud detection system came up in multiple threads. Would you be willing to assist our team with technical analysis?" There was no hesitation. "Absolutely," I said, because I wasn't chasing justice anymore. I was holding the flashlight while it found her. That afternoon, I uploaded a secured archive of logs pulled from the sandboxed environment I'd set up back when Elena started traveling more frequently. My system had captured every digital footprint she left: expense report drafts, repeated late-night logins from unknown IP addresses, file access logs for restricted financial directories. Every keystroke she thought was invisible had been time-stamped and stored, not as surveillance, but as part of the integrity framework I'd built for clients. Elena never realized our life shared the same architecture. Marissa was stunned by the clarity. "These aren't just breadcrumbs," she said. "They're signed confessions." The reports laid bare her habits: fabricating invoices at 2:13 a.m., accessing vendor data from hotel Wi-Fi in places she claimed she never visited. The logs didn't show wrongdoing, they told a story. A story Elena had written one quiet click at a time, believing no one ever read it back. Meanwhile, Elena, still unaware of the magnitude of the case unfolding around her, filed a motion through her attorney requesting emergency living funds. She argued she was financially stranded due to unjust asset lockdown. The judge reviewed the claim, then calmly pointed out the joint account containing $3,200.00 was untouched. "This amount is sufficient for essential living costs pending investigation," he ruled. Denied. I watched the footage from the hearing later. Elena in a beige blazer 2 sizes too big, her expression somewhere between panic and disbelief. She had gambled on pity, on courtroom optics, but the system she once dismissed as my obsessive hobby had already spoken. Every withdrawal, every digital handshake with falsified accounts, every time-stamped manipulation. But now, those keystrokes had become voices. And those voices didn't stutter, didn't cry, didn't spin narratives. They told the truth, precise, impartial, inescapable. She tried to manipulate the courtroom, unaware the judge already had her receipts. It started with a single red flag, then lit up the entire building. Within 2 weeks of the court's asset freeze, Atlas Merge launched its own internal investigation. Grant, the finance supervisor who'd first tipped me off, called again, but this time his voice was grim. "It's not just Elena," he said. "We've found at least 6 more employees involved in mirrored expense schemes and backdated invoices. All roads traced back to Cameron Wells, and what had started as suspicion had turned into a spreadsheet soaked in deceit. Like termites behind wallpaper once exposed, the structure collapsed. The deeper they dug, the more precise the operation appeared. Cameron, the VP of Strategic Partnerships, had been using Elena's charm and position in brand development as the perfect cover to move funds through dummy vendors. Shell companies registered to third parties with ties to both of them. Elena had been the face, Cameron had been the funnel, and now both were standing in the middle of a bonfire, with gasoline dripping from their sleeves. But the worst part wasn't just the money, it was the attempt to erase me in the process. One of the uncovered documents was a power of attorney form forged with my name, falsely notarized, granting Elena the right to sell jointly held property. The target? My house. The plan was simple: transfer it under market value to a third-party buyer, a friend of Cameron's posing as an investor, then flip it a few months later at full market price. Estimated profit? Nearly $180,000. 0 cents. All while I thought we were just ending a marriage. But this wasn't divorce. It was a hostile extraction. Detective Lori Monroe from the Columbus Real Estate Fraud Task Force contacted me after the property scheme surfaced. "We've had 3 similar cases in the last 18 months, she said. "Your logs and email trail just gave us our first concrete pattern. Your ex-wife may have been part of a larger real estate manipulation ring, and you were ground zero." It was like discovering someone had been living inside your walls the whole time, quietly pulling out nails one by one. By now, the FBI, State Financial Crimes Unit, and local real estate enforcement had all launched parallel investigations. Elena and Cameron were named as primary persons of interest. The evidence against them wasn't just mounting, it was drowning them. Every system she thought she could outsmart had become a megaphone for her deceit. Surveillance footage, metadata, wire transfers, forged signatures. It all pointed to premeditation, not desperation, not error, strategy. And for all her intricate planning, Elena had made one critical mistake. She'd forgot the systems she used weren't hers, they were mine. She'd tried to disappear with millions, but now, she might disappear behind bars. She planned to vanish into luxury. Justice doesn't wear capes, it doesn't raise its voice or throw punches. It walks into the room with a stack of paper and the quiet confidence of someone who's already seen how the story ends. When the trial began at the U.S. District Court in downtown Columbus, Elena walked in wearing a gray suit that still looked expensive. She faced 13 federal charges: wire fraud, conspiracy, identity theft, and falsifying legal documents. If convicted on all counts, she was staring down up to 25 years in federal prison, and from the look on the prosecutor's face, they weren't interested in plea deals. But Cameron Wells, her partner in deception, folded fast. His attorney arranged a plea deal in exchange for full cooperation. Cameron turned state's witness, outlining exactly how the siphoning began, how the vendor loop was constructed, how Elena created and managed falsified marketing expenses. He didn't try to protect her. He buried her. "She architected everything," he said flatly on the stand. "I executed the payments, but she built the structure." And with that, the prosecution's job became less about proving guilt, and more about managing how thoroughly they would demonstrate it. When I was called to testify, I wore a navy suit I'd owned for years, and carried a simple folder with a USB drive. The prosecution had already received the full digital logs, but my presence wasn't about delivery, it was about clarity. I took the stand, raised my right hand, and answered their questions not with emotion but precision. Yes, I'd built the fraud detection protocols at Horizon Trust. Yes, I'd adapted similar systems for our household finances. Yes, I'd noticed unusual account activities tied to Elena's access points. Yes, I had evidence that she forged my signature. No, I never gave her permission. No, I wasn't aware she was embezzling from her employer. No, I hadn't retaliated. I'd simply reported anomalies. There were no theatrics, no voice-cracking monologues. I wasn't there to tear her down. I was there to lift up the facts. Because they did all the damage on their own. Her attorney tried to redirect, asked if I was motivated by bitterness or revenge. I looked him in the eye and said, "Justice isn't a punch, it's a paper trail too precise to deny." The courtroom stayed quiet. No one objected. When Elena took the stand in her own defense, her story fractured on impact. She blamed Cameron, she claimed she didn't understand the finances, she insisted the property sale had been miscommunicated, but the evidence had no sympathy. Emails with metadata, time-stamped transactions, IP logs. It was a symphony of self-incrimination, and the jury didn't need to hear the encore. The trial lasted 9 days. On the 10th, the verdict came swift and unanimous, guilty on all counts. The judge didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "Sentencing will occur in 6 weeks. Until then, Ms. Greer is to remain in federal custody without bond due to flight risk and case severity." That was it. No applause, no gavel slam echoing through marble, just a click of handcuffs and the low rustle of finality. The courtroom didn't cheer, it simply sealed shut the vault where she'd tried to bury the truth. After everything collapsed, marriage, illusions, the empire of shared dreams repurposed as evidence, there was only forward. I sold the house in Columbus for $490,000, 0 cents, took what remained of the restored retirement funds and quietly moved to Greensboro, North Carolina. No big announcement, no farewell party. Just a man with 2 suitcases, a trail of court documents, and a deeply reprogrammed definition of peace. I bought a modest 2-bedroom home on the east side of town. 1 story, quiet street, No guest room to be decluttered. No echoes of the past in the hallways. Just solid walls, good locks, and silence I didn't have to explain. By fall, I'd accepted a part-time teaching role at Elon University, lecturing in a program called Applied Financial Security. The irony wasn't lost on me. After decades of building systems to catch other people's fraud, I was now turning my story into lectures, not as cautionary tales but as case studies. How anomalies doesn't surface in relational databases. The role of metadata in uncovering real-time deception. Every slide came from life. Every line of code had once stood between me and financial ruin. My students took notes. Some were wide-eyed, a few skeptical, but none left unchanged. They weren't just learning finance. They were learning what happens when the systems we trust are tested by the people we love. One afternoon, about 7 months after the verdict, a letter arrived. No return address, but the postmark was unmistakable. Federal Correctional Institution, Danbury. I opened it in the kitchen, under the soft whir of the ceiling fan. 4 pages, handwritten in familiar cursive. Elena. The words were predictable: apology, confusion, regret. She wrote that the silence in prison was louder than any courtroom. That betrayal looked different when reflected through steel bars and stripped privilege. That she'd started attending financial ethics classes inside, and thought of me during every session. I read it once, then again, slower. Then I folded it neatly and slid it into my filing cabinet next to the audit logs and bank statements. I didn't reply, not out of hatred, but because some documents are meant to be filed. That letter was a confession, not a conversation, a record, not a reconciliation. I don't hate her. I don't love her either. Those emotions belong to a version of me that didn't know the architecture of deception could be disguised as a marriage. What I do believe in now more than ever is the neutrality of systems. My logs didn't get emotional. My protocols didn't flinch. They flagged the truth when my heart couldn't bear it, and that blindness saved me. Because when betrayal wears a familiar face, it's not fury or forgiveness that protects you, it's structure. These days, my life is smaller, simpler, but cleaner. I wake up early, check market trends, bike to campus, drink black coffee. And when I lecture about data integrity and transaction forensics, I end with one sentence every student remembers. In a world full of human error, sometimes the only thing you can trust, because betrayal breaks hearts, but systems break schemes.